We're live.
Hey, welcome everybody to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. It is the 29th of January, and we are here with our communication union districts to get an update, learn about their progress. So we'll go around the room and introduce ourselves, and then we'll turn it over to you. I'm Rep. Kathleen James from the Bennington 4 district.
Scott Campbell from St. Godbury. Richard Bailey from Lamoille 2. Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Bennington. Christopher Howell, Rutland 4.
Aaron Corey, Washington 2.
And Putner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
All right, and joining us in the room today.
Kitty Upford Chase, NEKCB.
Daily Perry with McCracken Group.
Super.
Nick Angeloni, I'm the chair of the board for NKC.
Gwen Zakroff from EPDB.
FX Flynn, I am the chair of the EC Fiber Governing Board.
Rob Beatsky with Vermont Communications Union Districts Association.
Super.
Mike Southworth, Caledonia 2.
And you'll be joining us in a moment. So, all righty. For the record.
For the record, I'm Ellie DeVilliers, the Executive Director of Maple Broadband and the Chair of the Vermont CUD Association.
And my name is Krista Shute. I'm the Executive Director of NEKCB, which is NEK Broadband and CV Fiber, and also the Secretary of the Vermont CUD Association.
Right. Go. Do you have slides to share? Or?
Yes.
We do.
Great.
You just have to do share on Zoom there.
And we have until 9:30, and then we're going to swap seats.
Okay. So while we're getting the slides up, the first one is to just remind you guys, to orient you as to what are communications union districts and then what is the Vermont CUD Association. So communications union districts, we are municipal entities and we are not-for-profit. So we're like a water district or a sewer district. And what we do is we build broadband. We build fiber to the home. So CUDs were originally formed by a vote of towns coming together. And then towns can add themselves to CUD by vote select board. So the CUDs were mostly all formed, with the exception of EC Fiber, which is the original and the model. The newer CUDs were formed around 2020. So the governance of the CUDs is every town is able to appoint delegates and an alternate, and that comes together to form the governing board. So we have governing boards, and then many of us have executive committees that meet more frequently to handle the day-to-day, because these are obviously very technical kinds of things that we're working on. So require more time and more expertise than you could reasonably expect delegates from every member town to participate in. So as CUDs, we are committed to universal service. That is one of the requirements of the Act 71 ARPA funding, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but that's also our commitments as CUDs. We want to make sure that we build infrastructure and that everyone can access the infrastructure. And as public entities, accountability, transparency, these are all important to us. So we as CUDs, we are public entities, so we own the infrastructure, and every one of us, there's different models for how we've done it, but we all have public-private partnerships for the operation of the networks. So VCUDA is the Vermont Communications Union Districts Association. So 8 of the 9 CUDs are members of VCUDA, and we exist to come together to act as a shared voice in matters of policy, government affairs, and also just to work together and collaborate on things that touch all of us, which is really actually a lot of things from how we do things. Because if you think about it, again, with the exception of EC Fiber that's been around for a number of years, the rest of us we're all startup entities and small startup entities. Some are bigger than others, but it makes sense that when we're all building things and getting stood up and with our operating partners, that we would have a lot of things where it makes sense to collaborate with each other to make sure that we're learning from each other and learning from each other's mistakes and really just being as efficient as we can with what we're doing and how we're doing it. So that's really the point of CUDA, is to drive efficiencies, and just some examples of how we do that. So the goal, statewide world-class broadband. So this is our goal, but this is also the legislature's goal. So as some of you will remember very well, and some of you may have maybe less familiar, but will know this is now not that old of history. Act 71 of 2021 formed the Vermont Community Broadband Board and the Vermont Community Broadband Fund. So that was taking about $250 million of ARPA money and using that to kickstart the CUDs. So that was like the middle part of the story, but it's important because this funding is what enabled us. The intent of this funding was to get us to critical mass where we could finish the job on our own. And that universal service mandate of saying, if you're going to take the grant money, you can't just take it and cherry pick. You need to build to the unserved and underserved. You need to commit to finishing the job. So that was the legislature's strategy as outlined in Act 71 of 2021. And that is the marching orders we have been going on ever since then. So fiber, as CUDs and anything that's funded under this, we've been building fiber to the premises. So FTTP, sometimes you might hear FTTH, fiber to the home. So this is the only technology that is guaranteed to deliver symmetrical broadband. So terrestrial wireline infrastructure. I was having a conversation this morning about different forms of wireless and how they don't necessarily work. I mean, they're great for what they are, but when you have terrain and you have weather and you have hills and you have leaves, it's not, you can't expect a technology to be, to be a wireless technology to be perfect. And then also we have satellite technologies, which again, work great, but they have their own technical drawbacks, one of which is capacity, that if everyone was to all try to get on the same satellites, they wouldn't be able to handle the load any more than if you've ever been to an event and you overload the cell tower and nothing works, same sort of principle. So this fiber that we're building is a long-term infrastructure investment. And then as it's CUD controlled, publicly controlled, we're enabling upgrades and then the pricing and consumer protection for the long run. So we're building the infrastructure, and the fact that we have control over it is important to be looking after these long-term considerations. So again, EC Fiber was the pioneer. Without them as a model, I think it's fair to say we wouldn't be where we are today. And CUDs have pursued different strategies to get to the end result, but the end result is we're not at the end yet, but we're getting there.
Okay. And I would say in terms of the different strategies, there are certain CUDs that, partnered with Fidium, and then there are certain CUDs that partner with other private ISPs like WCVT or GWI. And the important thing to realize on the Fidium ones is a lot of those areas were greatly served, right? It was really big donut holes and you really just needed to get the edges on the piece. And so that's why that kind of structure made sense in those areas.
Yep. So there's a couple of testimonials here, and you may have seen these before, but we put these up really just to put on the record and remind everyone why we're doing what we're doing.
Right. It was really big donut hole.
Okay.
There's 2 or 3 don't.
Yeah.
Now I'm hungry.
Yes, someone's hungry. Yeah. So you can read those testimonials, but again, we spend all day focused on what we're building and trying to make sure that we're building and getting to the last mile and having the appropriate quality and having the appropriate financial controls. And basically, we focus all day on what we're building. And so it's nice to reflect sometimes about why we're doing what we're doing. What are some of the effects we're having on people and the ability to work from home? One of my favorite customers in my district is a level 3 residential care facility. And when we were first building out, they were contacting us practically desperate because they were trying to have calls with the state. They're trying to upload documents and it just wasn't working in the DSL that they had. And so for them, it's been absolutely transformative. And you just imagine that's a story that I happen to know, but I'm sure that there's many others that I don't know. So this is why we're doing what we're doing.
I think one of the other nice things about the formation of the CUDs and the impact of what the legislature really created is that we really spurred the private providers to go in and invest in anything that was anywhere remotely, had a decent business case. They went in and got it done so that, because they knew that otherwise we were going to go in and get it done. And so that's made a big difference. So this next slide, this is where we were 5 years ago in terms of fiber. And so you can see a lot of EC fiber is built out with fiber, some VTEL.
Color colors.
What? Oh, right. Sorry. So So the blue is fiber and the green is cable and the gray is unserved. So that was what we were trying to do. So you can see how much gray is throughout the district there. And in 2020, the next slide I'm going to show you is 2025. It has the same colors and then also pink. So that's how much fiber has been built out. I mean, that's
Not
a
amazing.
massive amount of build out that's occurred in the state in just
Sorry.
4 years.
Sorry, what's the pink? I'm sorry.
And the pink is what is in progress. So those are
Okay.
funded areas. So for ours on the east, which is block, but that whole east section is our USDA Reconnect grant, and we've got a Community Connect grant down here. There's some ARPA funding inside of our district, as well as the Northwest ARPA funding in those 4 towns. So the rest of what is in here, the rest of the gray lines are what will be covered by, by the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Fund. We're waiting for the final from NTIA on.
And one more thing, if you could just go back. I think what really strikes me about this map is that you look at, I mean, just to amplify what Krista said earlier, that if you look at Burlington, for example, there's some fiber, but there's a lot of cable. And if you look at the states where all fiber is where EC Fiber has been doing this for a really long time. And then now you go forward and you can see all the little towns that previously only had cable. Now they also had fiber. So it's exactly as Krista said, that it wasn't so CUDs didn't build all this. As a matter of fact, we built a precious small amounts of this in the last couple of years. But the fact that we were building and the fact that we're here spurred that private investment. So it's a great success story of the policy working to be able to not only start up CUDs and get them to the point of being able to move on to the next stage, but also to spur that private investment. So we got universal service. So we're getting it a lot faster than it would be if CUDs had to build every mile ourselves with the funding we've had.
And I'll take slight umbrage with, that small. I mean, for any KCV, we reached this year 1,200 miles of network. So we've built a ton, and that's 10,000 passings. So that speaks to the rurality of what we're building to. And we're now at over 2,000 customers. So
that's a
lot of
great point,
progress.
because there's about 2,500 miles that's been funded. And so practically half of that is in Krista's district. And she's probably seen the least of private providers coming and filling in because of the rurality and the
Yeah.
more business cases.
Yeah, that map, that's everybody's fiber, Charters and Comcast.
That's correct.
All providers.
Well, Charter and Comcast are paid.
But they do have some fiber that's now, so anything that was submitted to the FCC as being fiber provided is blue on here, and most of them are green for Charter and Comcast, but some of their most recent stuff is listed as blue.
So communication by fiber may be better, but cable is still adequate.
Well, cable is just so the U.S. Treasury has defined broadband, or I'm not sure if it was them originally, but the Treasury definition of broadband is 100 megabits per second down and 20 megabits per second up, which is not symmetrical. And the reason for that is that cable is using a different technology where you get your download speeds are faster than your upload speeds. So it's from back in the day, the internet was mostly, you use it for entertainment and watching things. And nowadays you want to be on a Zoom call. It needs to actually be bi-directional in both ways. So, I mean, is 100/20 broadband? I mean, that's probably a matter of philosophical debate. What we can say is that it's not symmetrical, and that's especially if you reach a capacity where too many people are using it at once and it slows down, the fact that that the upload is not as fast as the download can really create problems. So I don't know if that answers your
Well,
question.
Yeah, 100/20 is the minimum, but you can get faster than that on cable, perhaps, depending on the number of amplifiers or whatever the situation. You've answered what I needed to know.
Yeah, but I mean, it is a good point. There's a theoretical maximum speed that technologies can have. And in order to see those speeds, you not only need to have that infrastructure, but you need to be managing things properly upstream. I mean, it's possible to take a fiber network and have it not see the symmetrical gig speeds that it's capable of if things aren't managed properly upstream. So, but it's a very solvable problem, right? And it's much easier to solve when you have that symmetrical infrastructure at the door.
I was just going to ask whether anybody knows if the cable companies are converting to fiber as well over time.
So the cable companies are currently building fiber out in the areas where they're building. They're not
They're not building more coax.
correct.
Yeah.
So when Comcast came in an area that we were about to build and built out, they built out fiber. And I think the thought process is they know that that's the future.
Yeah.
And so as they're replacing network, they'll continue to, upgrade their network. Now they won't be able to go in because their entire network isn't on the same, type of system. They won't be able to maximize what fiber can do in an all fiber network,
Mhm.
Until much, farther down the road.
Right.
Yeah.
And it is actually amazing when you think about these technologies. That's telephone service. We then use those same lines for DSL service. First, they were never designed, and the cable was originally rolled out for entertainment and getting TV into our homes, right? And now we started using that decades ago for the internet as well. So, I mean, fiber is really, if you think about it, like the first purpose built, the reason to get fiber to a home is broadband, and then the other things come on top of it. So it's a little bit of a switch in that way. But to Krista's point, the industry recognizes where there's a business case, this is actually the best technology. There's not always a business case, but where it is, this is the best.
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering if the cable companies are sort of declared an intention to migrate to fiber.
Seems that way.
Okay.
We just wanted to take the time to appreciate everything that you have done, because it is that map that you just saw is because of the work that the legislature has done. So the formation of the CUDs under Chapter 82 that was spearheaded by EC Fiber, and then the formation of the Vermont Community Broadband Board in 2021, and that really enabled the use of those ARPA funds, the decision to invest in the infrastructure of our state. And that is a long-term, 50, 60-year infrastructure investment. The merger legislation was super important. Passing it in the time frame that you did was ideal for NEK Broadband and CV Fiber. And it has been, we are a really strong CUD because of that merger. We have grown year over year from 3 employees to 6 to 12 to 26. And so we are, proud of what we're doing and the fiscal responsibility that we've been able to bring to it in that growth. And then in 2024, enabled the match funding for the BEAD program, which was a $30 million match for any federal grant. So we've used that to help us do our USDA Reconnect grant, which is in that Essex County area there's no map up there anymore, sorry. and it was absolutely critical for our participation in BEAD. And so we're still waiting anxiously for that, but these things have happened because of you. So thank you.
Can you just remind the committee what BEAD is, how the feds have changed it, and what Vermont, the reapplication process and where we are now? Not in depth, but just set the stage for us.
Yes, and I think Christine is probably also going to cover that. So
Okay. Well, we can,
yeah. So is that where you planning to cover it?
Yes.
Or okay.
all right, never mind.
Is it better to wait?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. I will say that especially so the Northeast Kingdom and Central Vermont, we had more than 50% of the addresses in BEAD. So more than 50% of the addresses that were eligible for funding were in our communications union district, which is now 72 towns. So BEAD was really critical for our area. And as the provisional awardee awaiting, the final from NTIA, we did find ourselves in negotiating positions after, the bid as a result of the benefit of the bargain round that went into play. But we have, found a way to make it happen, and I hope put forward something that the NTIA is going to approve. And we intentionally made the decision to invest and to commit to invest our own match. So in addition to the state match, we've committed to $10 million of our own funding, which will come sort of at the end of the line as it's needed. But we've committed to that. And that showed, I think that was really important to show that we have skin in the game and that this isn't all publicly funded. And the business case is excellent for that. There's no issue. So
Can you remind us what NTIA stands for?
National Telecommunications and Information Authority.
Administration.
Yeah, thank you.
They're the ones that will approve the bid.
They approve BEAD and then it has to also get approved by NIST
National Institute for
Standards.
standards and technology, right? Yeah.
Real quick,
acronym soup. And just for the record, BEAD is Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, which is the next round of federal funding. And unlike ARPA, which is very flexible, this is not flexible. And the set of rules under the Biden administration changed under the Trump administration. So it's been so many years we've been working on this thing that we know this acronym. It's like embedded into our brains. But that should orient you as to what we're talking about there.
yep, Rep. Kleppner.
Where are you gonna get $10 million?
So we would do it the same way that EC Fiber has done it through revenue bond financing. So we received a commitment letter from KeyBank for doing that revenue financing. They were, quite comfortable with that number and willing to commit to that. So, and again, we'll use it to the degree that it's necessary. So to the degree that we don't need contingencies or, things like that, that will help lower it.
And you can service that with revenue from your customers.
Exactly.
But no.
Rep. Sebelia.
Yeah, just on this point, and Madam Chair, I want to apologize for coming in late, not doing my disclosure. I serve on the VCBB board appointed by the CUDs. So just to get that out there. But to this point, when we passed the legislation, we were really intentional and expected that CUDs would need to borrow and debate at this point about general obligation or revenue bonds. And I think you all are the first ones to look at this. Is that right?
You mean besides EC Fiber in terms of revenue bonds? Yes.
Excuse me.
I so soon forgot. First baby CUD?
First baby
Yeah.
CUD.
Yes.
Yeah.
We owe 70 million.
So, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And if I might, since I have the floor, I just want to remind the committee, the folks that are in this room represent literally hundreds of volunteers, Vermonters, that have stood up this infrastructure to ensure that the failures of the market in rural Vermont, the failures of the private industry to build out to a lot of our consumers, these folks really have stood this up and they've had. So it's an excellent grassroots bottom up story.
It's a huge difference in the towns where there's no cable. There's been no investment by the private network, right? Because there really is nothing there. And so when you have a CUD that believes in public infrastructure and reinvests the profits back into those communities, whether it's in the form of new infrastructure, repair and maintenance, or creating more affordability and lowering prices. And so I think by taking our tax dollars and having made this move into putting them into public entities, we're protecting those tax dollars down the road to be reinvested and reinvested rather than a one-time investment. And I think that's
Yep. And our next slide is talking a little bit about, well, this is the road ahead. It's also what comes next. So go back to, back to this one. But just on that point, so NEKCB has been doing it for a very long time. Some of you may remember the Affordable Connectivity Program that the federal government funded $30 a month for eligible households to be able to afford the cost of internet. And so a number of us CUDs, including EC Fiber, if I'm not mistaken, have grandfathered in people who qualified for that, have been self-funding it ever since the federal funding went away. And as Maple Broadband, we've been working, and one of the things that we're actually announcing today is that our governing board has approved funding for us to not only continue that, but to expand it and to qualify new households. And so that's, again, an example of, even at the small size that we are, we have the budget to be able to do that given the assumptions we have. But we can always evaluate it over time. But that commitment to affordability is really important, because if the infrastructure is there and people can't afford it, again, as not-for-profit municipal entities, that is not great for us. We feel like the job is not done if it's there, but people can't afford to use it. So the road ahead, obviously, like that's a little bit of another layer, but first thing is we need to make sure that we finish the job of universal service and make sure it is actually available on the road. And so we have the CUDs, DB Fiber, EC Fiber, Maple Broadband, NEKCB, and Northwest Fiber Works, all of us are continuing to expand. 3 of us are provisional winners under BEAD, and that will enable that to continue when that finally all comes through. And then Lamoille Fiber Nets, Otter Creek CUD, and Southern Vermont CUD are all in the stage of project closeout and sustainability. So those are the CUDs that have partnered with Video. And so again, a little bit of a different model. That's they've achieved universal service, and they're now getting to that point of what's next. So we've been talking about the Broadband Equity and Access Deployment Program a little bit as well. I think nothing really more to say there. And yeah, Bakuda is continuing to work with CUDs to collaborate. And it's interesting that, you know, as we're all starting to get into this process of being not only starting up, but getting further down the road, we're able to have collaboration conversations around things like how are we doing marketing and what can we learn from each other that's before didn't really make sense because we're all very different stages. Oops. Okay. So here's some of our legislative priorities or considerations going forward. I mean, first and foremost is that what the legislature set out your strategy a couple of years ago, as Krista covered, it is working. We're not done yet, but it's working. So the first thing again is really just to thank you and to encourage you to stay the course and continue what's already been started. So we need to receive that NTIA, by we actually mean the Vermont Community Broadband Board, needs to receive approval from the relevant federal agencies in order to get the BEAD funding released and to enable all the provisional awardees, which are some CUDs and some private companies as well, to be able to get the money to finish the job and get to the end of the roads. And in general, again, we're working on getting the broadband out to the roads, but in order to the last 100 feet is its own challenge. So having the broadband available doesn't really mean a lot if you can't get it to the house. And so one of the things, for example, is to the degree that there's new housing developments, it would be really great to ensure that the property developers or individuals who are building households are aware that there are CUDs and to coordinate with CUDs. It's so much cheaper to be able to connect to home or to put in a conduit, an underground buried conduits to be able to get fiber to a property if you do that when it's being built rather than after the fact.
Yeah, can't emphasize enough how important it is to put the infrastructure into building complexes and houses before and as it's being built rather than having to come afterwards. It also helps promote competition by doing that. And many of the CUDs have committed to, helping fund some of that. So as you see legislation around housing and things like that, really encourage you to consider or speak with your, fellow legislators about the importance of including something like that as a pretty simple, condition of funding or that kind of thing. So.
Yep. And Krista mentioned competition, and this is also quite important in property developments and multi-dwelling units that residents be able to have a choice. I mean, this is whole thread we could go down, but consumer choice and competition in general is really important to making sure that the free market is doing its job of encouraging everyone to play nicely in the sandbox and look after the interests of the consumer. So some of the longer term challenges are we have this public infrastructure and we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but again, the affordability, digital skills, and barriers to access is really quite important, both for individuals who are using it and for community anchor institutions, nonprofits, schools, to make sure that it's there and that we're really thinking through what does success look like for us as a society. It's a new thing to be facing a situation in a world where everyone has access to broadband, but is it affordable? Are they using it? Are they using it safely? What are the cybersecurity considerations? There's a lot of work to be done here. And part of it is even just starting with with a shared understanding of what does success look like, and then how do we do that? Because to some degree, it's a little bit of a simpler thing if our job is to, amongst a pretty small number of organizations that are building telecommunications infrastructure, but starting to think about making sure that it's effectively used for the maximal benefit of society. That's a much broader collaborative conversation. So that's where we're starting to think about. And that's pretty much all I have to say about that.
There appears to be somebody in the waiting room.
It could very well be.
I'm not sure if we're
We're supposed to admit
Are
them
we
or not.
supposed to admit them or?
My God.
Oh,
I'm not sure who that is, so I'm not going to.
let's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because actually, I don't know. Is somebody else coming with you that would
Yeah.
be joining online?
They'll be joining online, Heron Herzog and JB.
Oh,
JB,
okay.
Yeah.
That's who it
Okay,
is.
is that,
That's who it is.
we, okay. Great. Thanks for checking.
Yeah, and so we're pretty much done. So this final slide is just a reminder of what Laura had mentioned, sorry, Representative Sevilla had mentioned earlier, that, we sit here as staff of CUDs, and so we're paid to do this, but we have so many volunteers that sit in our governing boards and meet in those things. And I think about my executive committee, for example, we meet twice a month for an hour and a half, and a number of them spend time outside of that meeting as well. It's a tremendous dedication of time and energy and blood, sweat, and tears by volunteers from our towns, from the grassroots, that are dedicated to the mission of what we're doing here. So it's important to remember that and acknowledge those people as well.
Yeah, and the time that they put into going into their communities, speaking to them, developing that interest, helping people understand the options.
Thank you.
Victoria?
Oh, yeah, just on the board, with the mergers, the boards were gonna be really big. I'm just curious how that's working.
Sure.
So we are now 72 towns, which means we have 72 voting members on our governing board, and we have roughly that number as alternates. So there's 120 to 140 people at any given point in time. Part of what we did was we delegated more authority to the executive committee on behalf of the governing board. So the executive committee consists of 11 board members. We have a county representation, so to make sure that there was diversity and representation on the board. So each county that has more than 2 towns in our district, which is 5 counties each have a representation of their person, and so they work with all the towns that are in their district to keep them more updated, make sure, and so that's been part of it. And then what happens is that the executive committee reports to the governing board what it did. And then the governing board has the opportunity not to change it, because that would get us in a whole, contractual mess, but it has the opportunity to comment on it and to, sort of approve it in so to speak. So yeah, that's how we've managed to navigate that. Cause it was really, and honestly, many of our board members, they're like, look, there's so much here. I can't keep up with it. Asking 72 people to keep up with everything that we're doing, and the, 5 different federal funding grant sources and thousands of miles. It's too much. So in addition to the 11-person executive committee, I also have a check-in team, which is a subcommittee of 4, which is my chair and vice chair and 2 of the county representatives, that I use to just check in with them. It keeps them up to date. We identify what needs to go up to the next level. So I think we found a good way to govern it, and Nick's done a fantastic job, which I am super grateful for.
Great. Thanks you guys for being here. Really appreciate your testimony. Why don't we take a minute to swap out seats and admit folks who we know who they are from the Zoom room.
Joining us too.
And we're going to welcome our guests. So if you guys are comfortable introducing yourselves. So this is the House Energy and Digital Infrastructure Committee. And today we're doing a little bit of digital infrastructure. So we're taking testimony on broadband. And we're checking in with our communication union districts, which have been busy at work rolling out broadband fiber all over the state, which is pretty awesome. So if you guys are comfortable, if you could introduce yourselves. I recognize a few fun friends. So
I'm Jillian Joyce. I'm a teacher at Bernberg Academy, and here with a group of students, part of the Climate Cocktail the Youth Lobby Day. So,
Jen Lawler, also a teacher at Bernberg Academy.
Brooke Sewell, I'm a student at Bernberg Academy. Emily, and I'm a student at Bernberg Academy.
It's Evelyn, I'm a student as well.
My name's Naomi, I'm also a student.
Marlo, I'm also a student.
awesome. I see. So you guys are all BBA, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. This is so fun. I want to make sure I connect with you guys before you take off. So thank you for being here. And we are returning to our testimony. We are now going to hear from the Vermont Community Broadband Board. We're going to get a bit of an annual report and talk a little bit about your recommended budget for FY27. We have to do our due diligence as the Oversight Committee. So welcome. If you could introduce yourself for the record, we're happy to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Christine Hallquist. I'm the Executive Director for the Vermont Community Broadband Board. I was appointed by the governor in July 21, and I'm very proud of the progress that the CUDs have made, as you just heard, and we'll talk more about where we're headed. Heron Herzog will be running the presentation. And next slide, Heron. If you look at the progress of where we are, we've got commitments. We're actually, this year, we're focusing on every single remaining address in the state. The past years, we were looking at how do we get to the areas. Now, we don't want to end the year and have somebody say, yeah, but I didn't get this. So we're down to less than 1% of the addresses that we need to look at. And we're actually down to half of 1%. And we're looking at every address and saying, how are we going to get there?
I'm sorry, how many addresses is that 0.5%?
That 0.5% represents about 1,800 addresses.
1,800, the last 1,800.
Out of 315,000.
Yeah.
Could you say, let's just say that number again for the record. Sorry, it's remarkable work. 315,000 addresses. And we are down to the last 1,800 that don't have access to fiber.
That we haven't identified how they're going to get access. So
it's amazing.
We're not there yet, but we've got all those locations funded, and we're looking at the last half of 1%. And it is kind of like the 80-20 principle. The amount of work you have to do for those remaining addresses is almost the same as you had to do to get to the rest. Because some of these addresses are located. What I should say, we're also including off-grid addresses as the BEAD program requires. Act 71 was on-grid, but BEAD requires us to look at off-grid as well.
Nice when government works.
So, and we're here to present the annual report. I won't take you through the detail as to what the requirements are, but we're here to tell you about the budget, the progress, and how we're ensuring. You see one line there. We're talking about every single E911 locations. So in the executive summary, next slide. So as you've heard, we're continuing to have statewide progress towards universal and reliable broadband. That we've responded to some major shifts, and I'll talk about that later. You talk about we had a program that was in place. All the states were working on it for 3 years. We got a new administration, a new set of terms and conditions in June of this year, and we all scrambled to make the adjustments. I will talk about. We're very proud of that we had funding. We still had federal funding allowing us to do an affordable long drop program, which I'll also talk about. And of course, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. So as you heard, we will get to every addresses with over 100 over 20. The vast majority are expected to be fiber optic internet. If you look at where we'll end up, I'll get to the point where percentages of where we'll end up later in the presentation, but we are going to get to the majority of the addresses. And those, you asked the question earlier about cable. The cable is ultimately migrating to fiber optic because fiber optic is by far the least expensive infrastructure. It's at about 1/10 the cost of cable long term in terms of operation maintenance. So the technology is evolving in front of us. So any of those cable locations will evolve to fiber over time. There will be some locations that will need to serve with satellite. That actually is part of the requirements of the BEAD program, which we'll talk about that in a minute. It's available statewide already, but the BEAD program actually provides some incentives for that. I talked about plans are in place. And again, our focus this year is really every single location. And we've got a great GIS mapping team that's looking at every single location. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So one of the things that we're disappointed was that with the new administration, we actually had funding for a digital equity program, digital empowerment program. We had a $5.3 million grant. And as you heard earlier from the VCUDA presentation, the importance of giving people the tools to use the network was what this program was about. It was about providing the training, the hardware, and the tools for those people that are on the other side of the digital divide. Because we know, and the data clearly shows that if you're on the wrong side of the digital divide, you're on the wrong side of the economic divide as well. So it really wasn't, we're highly disappointed. However, we're still continuing with what we can with that program. We are working on a device program, working with partners. So we've scrambled to figure out how we can continue parts of that program with very little or no funding. I'll talk briefly about the affordable long drop program. You know, you're familiar with the housing situation and the aging demographics of our state. Many of our folks are on fixed incomes, and yet they have houses that might have been built, several thousand feet from the main line. The good news is we've provided $8 million in funding to allow people to get connected. We call it the Affordable Long Drop Program. We're focusing on the lowest income people first, to be able to say, if you can't connect because you can't afford to provide the drop, then we'll fund that drop. And you're looking at typical drop could be $2,000, some as high as $5,000. So you might have somebody who's in low income, can't get connected because they can't afford the drop.
Remind me what drop means. So I live right in town. So when Fidium came through, just boop.
Yes.
So this is for.
Yeah, that boop was that's the drop.
That was the drop.
That is the drop. Yeah.
So this is how far does the boop have to be for it not to be seamless like it was for me?
Well, in general, we say 400 feet.
Okay.
However, even 400 feet can be it depends on the provider, but generally we're paying for the first 400 feet anyhow.
And then beyond that is it
will be funded through the affordable long drop.
For income eligible Vermonters. So
yes,
if you're low income and you can't afford.
Well, we're even going into medium income, low and medium income. We're just not providing it to the high income folks. If you've got a $3 million home and you're making a couple $100,000 a year, we won't fund it for you.
Probably pick up that tab.
Poor people.
I'm wondering how what the income levels are and how you verify them.
It's the CUDs are responsible for verifying, and they're typically working with agencies to do that.
Okay, with community agencies, like that,
And self-verification.
and self
We provide for low income, we use the community action agencies to do the same system that they're doing.
Mhm.
And so they do it for us and we pay them for that process. And then we don't have to take on that personal information and all those things. And those folks also get discounts on their overall bill.
Yeah.
And then the folks that will qualify into the program but are above that 200% of poverty line, they'll do a self-attestation that on their contract that identifies that they don't earn above the limits.
Yeah, great, thanks.
And we're also doing, we started a pilot with a device donation program where we're working with larger institutions to, when they replace their devices, we're working with partners to get those devices cleaned and upgraded so that we can provide those to people who are low income or on the other side of the digital divide and can't afford those devices. So we're doing that as well. That program was, we had to really reduce the size of it because of the affordability issue. That was meant to be a major program on the digital equity, but we're still carrying it out we figured out ways to do with partners. Next slide. So to give you some details about what the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program was, it was $42.5 billion provided nationwide in order to build infrastructure. And it was really targeted towards fiber optic as a priority under the previous administration. So with that, if you look nationwide, the majority of that money was going to fund fiber optic. With the new administration, that changed to where many of the states are doing a large percentage of satellite. What they said is, the previous administration understood that satellite was not a priority investment. It was understood that satellite was not considered broadband. The new administration labeled satellite as broadband. Yes.
I was just going to ask if you could remind us, we talked about this last year, maybe, why you with the broadband board, why we don't consider satellite to be.
Well, the problem,
just if you get a minute to remind me of that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll be happy to talk about it.
Yeah.
There's two problems with satellite. One is they don't have you have to communicate to the satellites with a radio frequency. It has limited ability to transmit data. So the numbers are, if you get more than seven people per square kilometer on it, you can't get the speeds. In addition to Vermont, we look at it, over half of our locations would not be able to get access because of the heavy tree cover. So tree cover and geographic depressions get in the way of that signal. You have to have 115-degree clear view of the sky in order to affect what. So the other thing that happened with the changes in June was there were labor and workforce requirements and climate resilience and other things that were dropped as part of the program. So we got through all the rounds of the benefit of the bargain round, as it's called, and at this point we're waiting to hear from the NTIA that we're one of 14 states remaining that have not yet heard, but we're cautiously optimistic. We've been having some positive meetings. In fact, the governor has been very supportive, and the governor and the DCVD attended a meeting with Ariel Roth last month to work through some of the final issues. So next slide. We talked about the Affordable Long Drop Program. I guess we don't need to say more about that. But key to qualify is any of the providers have to have a universal service plan to qualify. So we'll get into our operation and financial statements, and then we'll get back to the CUDs after the statement, because I know you asked for us to provide you information.
Yeah, thank you.
So the next slide, these are our administration and operation costs, expenditures. I want to make it clear, we are using federal and other money and not state funds for these programs. If you look at the original Act 71 legislation, it allowed us to use $1.5 million of state money for admin. We've been careful to avoid using that, and we are not going to use that. So when you look at these numbers, none of these are state funds. So I won't go through the details on this slide, but if you look at the personnel costs from 2025 to 26, changes due to healthcare and wage increases are the only changes that are occurring there. Okay, next slide. So we'll get into the budget reports here. Next slide. So what changes we've made? If you look at the funding from federal dollars and special dollars, what we've done is you see that $700,000 reduction, that is an adjustment that we made to put more of the administrative costs into the federal funding side out of the special funds. These are, we have USF funding, Universal Service Funds, that we want to try to preserve as much as possible for some of these special programs. So we've taken as much as we can and reallocated to what we're allowed to in terms of our administrative costs in terms of federal programs.
So again, the USF fund, that's a federal funding stream.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, USF's it's a statewide charge that's done on the phone. It's a telecom one.
But it's a state funding.
Yeah.
That's federal funding. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's not a general fund.
Right. It's a dedicated fund.
Okay. That's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. So next slide. If you look at you're looking at special dollars and federal dollars. These are grant funds that are going to be used to complete the CPF capital projects fund is where those funds are coming from in order to that's money that's being used to fund the CUDs to build infrastructure, that 43 billion. And then next slide, that kind of is a summary that shows what we've done. We've taken 700,000 out of special funds, we put it into federal funds. And again, we none of this is coming from state funds. And you have in your packet all the details.
Great.
I assume if you have any questions on that, we've got JB, but I was assuming that you probably wouldn't have any questions on the details considering.
I don't know, who's our approach? Dara, is that you or is that Scott? Who does broadband board for our budget letter? Great.
Yeah.
Scott may have questions for you.
Nope.
Follow up.
What are we talking about?
We have a couple weeks before we have to deliver our budget recommendation letter to House of Approps. And we were told this year that we definitely need to make sure that we're understanding every budget area that we oversee, and you guys are in that.
Okay.
And so we just want to make sure we have at least a paragraph or two indicating that we understand how your budget works, that we've satisfied any questions we might have. So I think this is a great start, and committee members or Rep Campbell can follow up with any questions.
Yep, I'd be glad to meet with Scott.
I have one clarification. I was talking about Universal Service Fund. There are both federal and state Universal Service Funds.
That's right.
And I think that your budget is only out of the Vermont Universal Service Fund. I'm not 100% sure about that, but the federal Universal Service Fund goes to reducing bills for low-income folks, as I recall.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll be glad to meet with Scott offline.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So why don't we skip right to
Scott, did you catch all that?
Yeah.
why don't we skip right to contracts, Aaron? Because this is probably something you should be aware of, is what contracts we have and why we're doing that. Okay, excellent. So these are all we've for the kind of budget for the we're talking about, assuming we get BEAD, we're talking over $500 million in grant funds. So we're managing that with a small group of 10, but we do that because we do a lot of contractual work with specific organizations. The key is, if you look at CTC Technology, they provide us engineering services. Allie, you have just met, she works with when we're trying to provide advice to the CUD, she helps us with that. We've got our government affairs person. Luck Grove does inspection. Before we finalize a grant, we do a final inspection and we ensure that it meets all the specifications that are required that we have set forth. With the board has established what are called outside plant requirements. We ensure that they comply with that before we close out. We've got, some of you may be familiar with Lucy Rogers. She's been a great subject matter expert. We did some work to look at creative financing services, but that kind of went away with the contracts changed. The RISI is a bit, we've been, RISI and RSM have been helping us with the digital equity program and the BEAD program. Stone Environment is our GIS services, and we did some high quality videos with multiple films that you may have seen.
Rep. Southworth?
Thank you. I see only one career center where you're doing apprenticeship program.
Yeah,
Do
they're
you have others or plans to do
no,
it?
they're the key. They do that for the entire state. We had a very successful apprenticeship program. We should say we have a pre-apprenticeship program. We've been working on this for years. Thanks for asking that question. I'll brag about that.
Yeah.
Our pre-apprenticeship program is very successful. We've worked with North Country Career Center, and I want to thank Krista Shute for helping take the lead on that. And what we've done is we work with the fiber optic companies to say, if we put you through this pre-apprenticeship program, if we put people through this, will you take them and put them right to work? So we've had about 70% placement on that program. So our graduates, we take 12 at a time. We put them through a 3-week training program, which includes pole climbing. If you look what happens with people going into this, about half of them fall out because they don't realize they can't work from heights. So we developed a specific program working with the fiber optic companies to say, what are the skills you're looking for? And we developed that program, and it's been very successful.
Can I just follow?
Yeah, sorry, you go.
So you say that the North Country Career Center, which I'm very familiar with, does statewide.
Yes.
How does that work?
Well,
through other tech centers?
Yes,
Dotted around the
yes, we
state?
work with other tech centers. There's a couple of them have been given at the Association of General Contractors right outside of Montpelier.
Great, thank you.
That was my question. Whether students had to be, in the North Country Career Center region, but it sounds like students from all over the state.
Yeah, we're funding the
Participate.
program.
Great.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we're one of the main trainers for the program is works directly for us. And so we give him that time off as part of our contribution to it. But it's also the process that we're in right now, that North Country's in right now, is getting that next train the trainer that can work farther south. So most of them have been done, as Christine said, in the Montpelier area or in the Newport area. But the next round, we should have another trainer that can get down into farther south and work with some of the other CUDs and contractors. So.
Great.
So we're going to give you an overall CUD update and try not to retell some things that I've already been told from Bikuda, but we'll provide some different perspectives. So next slide. So we have 9 CUDs, 216 Vermont towns. And this is really a remarkable success as a result of the legislation that was put in place by the legislature in 2015, allowing 2 or more towns to get together to form a municipal district. It's unique to Vermont. We're the only state that's done this, and it's been an envy of my peers, my state broadband peers, because of the level of engagement that we have as a result of this. The public engagement has been pretty amazing. The other states have struggled with public engagement. We've mastered that thanks to this legislation.
Rep. Morrow?
Can you remind me what happens in the 40 towns that are labeled as none?
Yeah, those 40 towns that are none, they have service already, essentially.
Okay.
Which is why they didn't
I see.
join the CUDs.
Okay. Thank you.
So if you look at the districts that are construction is complete, I want to remind you, we have more than 400 volunteers across the state. you know, as Laura had pointed out earlier, I think we take great pride that just the number of volunteers working on this is something we all can be proud of. So if you look at the CUDs where construction is complete, Southern Vermont, Otter Creek, Lamoille, Chittenden County, and EC Fiber. Construction ongoing is Northwest, DV Fiber, Maple Broadband, and NEKCD. And as Krista pointed out, over half of the remaining addresses go into NEKCD, which I'm going to really praise you for all of your great work. That's the next slide. I want to talk about the fact, if you look at NEKCD and the fact that they're serving 72 towns, they're serving the hardest territory in the state. You know, they're serving the Northeast Kingdom. And I just want to brag about NEKCD. Oh, this slide shows that they continue to meet or exceed their goals, which is not a small feat when you think of what they're trying to serve. So I think, you know, I think when you look at NEKCD and the CDs, this is our collective work has resulted in tremendous success. And thank you, Krista, for being such a great leader on this. So this is about the customer counts, how many are getting connected. And you can see that they're constantly right where they should be. And the customers determine, you heard Krista say earlier on, she'll fund some of the match through her customer revenue. And if she's meeting her goals, she will be able to afford to do that. So we work very closely with the CUDs. We meet with them monthly to review their performance. And then quarterly, they provide a written report to our board. We have a standard report where we look at number of miles that you've constructed versus what you've committed to construct, number of passings, the number of houses you pass or residents you pass and businesses compared to what you committed to. And then, of course, finally, what we call your take rate. How many customers are actually, how many people on those passings are actually taking the service? And that number of customer count is what really determines the long-term business success of the CUD. And so this count right there, that's, if you look at the one fundamental measure of success, that customer count is a key measure. And then if you look at the next slide, which is the recurring revenues, which is also tied directly to the number of customers that are connected.
Question about that.
Yeah, right.
So the number of customers has been going steadily up in the previous slide, and on this slide, it's flattens out September, October, November. Wondering what explains that.
Yeah. You want to explain that?
Sure. So the reason that occurs is because of seasonal disconnects through the winter.
Oh, I see.
And then people will come back on. So we have a reduced revenue that we receive during the winter.
So seasonal households that then disconnect for the winter.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Interesting.
Yeah, that is.
And then the next slide is kind of a summary to show where they are.
Oh yeah, you can skip over that one.
Well,
I'm not sure why it's there.
Yeah.
But
well, essentially, it shows that
you can, yeah,
you got
show it, it's fine.
$1.9 million versus a forecast of 1.890. So I think it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And then the next slide shows the miles that are built. So it's good. And then finally, let's talk in general about the benefits and where we go from here.
Okay.
It's one thing to get the network built, but it's the other thing is, why are we building it? And we're building it to improve the lives of Vermonters. So if we look at the different programs that are benefiting from this, and I will talk briefly about fiber versus other technologies. Especially with artificial intelligence coming along, the world is investing in fiber. Fiber is almost a limitless technology. If you look at the ability of one fiber the size of human hair to carry out the amount of data it can carry, it's you could almost say this is infinite. I visited a facility that was bringing in the fiber, undersea cable fiber from all across these different countries. Fiber cables that ran 4,000 or 5,000 miles. Huge facility with all these, these computers running. But you went to where it came in, and it looked like those little conduits that you have at your house.
That's wild.
Yeah. So this whole network, because these fibers are so small, can provide almost infinite amount of data. And fiber is a very reliable connection. You actually fuse the glass together. And of course, glass doesn't degrade. So if you look at the other technologies such as cable, where you have twisted connections that degrade over time, fiber is a superior technology, which is why the cable companies are moving to fiber, because they don't have those longer term maintenance issues that are coming. I'm proud to say, we're leading the nation in terms of the per capita number of people we're getting fiber to. So if you look at public safety, when we talk about the E9, you might have heard in the past about E911 issues. Many of those issues were related to the fact that you had only one copper feed to a what they call a slick site. Now we've got redundant fiber going to these sites. So from a public safety standpoint, your E911 services are going to be much more reliable. From a climate standpoint, positioning with fiber really enables the whole smart grid and allows you greater penetration of renewables. From a health standpoint, with the closing of our rural health clinics, telehealth becomes even more important. Workforce, of course, we look at we've had a very successful program in bringing people into the fiber optic. Which is you can go from there. You can go into any of the other technical fields, which we're working on as well. What are these paths that you can go from starting out as a fiber optic technician? More importantly, is how does this benefit our rural towns? Once you get fiber, if you go back to what we earlier talked about in 21, we talked about the fact that we can attract high intellectual margin businesses to our rural communities, which benefits the economy, of course. And education is moving towards the use of fiber for AI. And then farming, the amazing thing about farming is we talk about phosphorus runoff, through the application of smart technologies in your farms, you're able to do topical application of your nutrients, which is shown to be greater than a 30% reduction in nutrient application. So it saves farmers money, but it also protects our waterways. So if we look at our work to come is now, how do we educate Vermonters and provide the knowledge and the tools to benefit from these infrastructure investments?
I have a question about the public safety. You mentioned that. I don't think we've thought about the fact that fiber networks are designed to be redundant and travel in different directions if there's an interruption somehow. But one of the concerns that people have, we've been talking also in this committee about transition from copper lines to fiber for telephone service, for voice service, and the need for a battery backup in order to keep the ONT running when you have an interruption in electric. I'm wondering whether you have any idea about the evolution of technology in that sphere. I'm wondering about whether there are people working on reducing the electric needs of an ONT so that it could run on a battery for longer. So sometimes if you have a blackout, it might last more than 4 hours. It might last for days. Are you aware of any evolution in technology in that?
Well, I like, if I had my cell phone, I'd hold it up for you. You know, and so I started my career, the evolution of technology is reducing the power needs.
Yes.
Just evolved. When I started my career, I was designing computers for power systems for Digital Equipment Corporation with these big computers, because essentially they were only about 40% efficient at converting the electricity to information. We were able to get to the cell phone because we got to over 98% efficiency. So the same thing's happening at the ONT level. We're seeing greater and greater efficiencies occur. So we are focusing, the CUDs are focusing on providing education to their members and customers to ensure that they have the proper backup in place. That is an important thing to consider. Everybody should think about their backup needs, but it doesn't take a lot to back up an ONT for 8 hours.
Yeah. So I guess other than the general drift to more efficient technology, you're not aware of any particular developments in that sphere.
Yeah. Well, I'm aware the developments are happening at the NVIDIA chip level, right?
Yeah.
So yes, they're happening.
Yeah. Okay. Just curious.
But we can't, the competitive market, if you follow NVIDIA and the others, the competitive market is driving this.
Sure. Yeah, no, I know. And that's, I guess that's what I have in the back of my head, thinking about how phones manage so much more data than they did even, 8 years ago or something. And they're no bigger, and the battery lasts longer. So,
and the batteries are getting better too.
And the batteries are getting better too. So, so it just seems like we should be getting to a point where becomes a non-issue, where a battery backup for an ONT is essentially not a problem.
Yeah, we do need to continue to educate folks.
Yeah, but people need to be educated about the need for a battery backup for that device. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
All righty. Director Holquist, thank you so much Rep Bailey.
Got a couple of questions on operating and financial. I see we have a doubling of internal service fees, and what would cause that? And contractual went up to $1 million.
Yeah, well, the contractual is all part of meeting the BEAD requirements, so that's all federally funded. We have a set of requirements that are put, such as permitting requirements and others that need to be complied with. So this is all the contractual stuff is being worked through the BEAD and the capital programs. But as far as the internal service fees, those are fees we get charged from ADS and others as well. So they're not anything we necessarily have control over.
Good.
Basically, tech support. Tech support.
Sure. Okay. Director Holquist, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time and the information. And Rep Campbell will be in touch with any questions about the budget. So committee members have any questions about the budget, can you funnel those through Rep Campbell? We will be back. We can go off live and we'll be back at 11 o'clock.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.